Everyone. My name is Aubrey. It's nice to meet you all. Have you ever been in a conversation that got so heated in a moment, maybe over a comment someone had said to you, and you couldn't help but lash out and communicate in a way that either your message didn't come across as the way you wanted it to, or maybe even rude? Trust me, communication can be pretty challenging, and so can managing conflict, especially in communication. I've learned a lot over the last few weeks. And when I was researching not only communication, but the additional elements and concepts that play into our everyday life, more importantly, what I learned also was how to communicate effectively during a moment of conflict, but also how to utilize active listening in the moment of communication. And I have a few different experiences I want to share with you. More recently, there was a moment of conflict with a new team manager, and I want to talk about how I manage that conflict and how I still apply it in my everyday, and also how I've learned to become a better active listener. So, those are going to be my two main points that I'll cover today. The first one we'll jump back to is managing conflict. So, our definition or our textbook defines this definition as a communication process between people who perceive either incompatible goals or interferences in achieving their objectives or goals. And conflict does not arrive through communication. In fact, it arises through perception. And the story that ties into this conflict is, as I mentioned, a team manager who had came on board, and I had noticed right off the bat that our communication styles are different and our leadership styles are different. And that's already elements that are going to create a little bit of friction. But because of that, I had learned that with my democratic style of leadership and his autocratic style of leadership just really wasn't meshing well. And there came a moment where, in a meeting, unfortunately, I did what we would call kitchen sinking, and I threw everything out on the table. I talked about what I disliked about these different initiatives that we were taking, how that they would not impact our program. There was so many different elements to it. I kind of just word vomit, in other words, but we know it as kitchen sinking. And that didn't really bode well between him and I in terms of our working communication and him being my team lead. And due to that, I had to really take a step back and view my lens out of egotism and really narrow down and utilize the learnings that I have with this course on how to effectively communicate with one another and how do we resolve this conflict. And one of the biggest keys that I've had to learn, aside from just ultimately changing my mindset, was also that it's an ongoing challenge, meaning there is a only an effective way him and I can communicate with one another, which is in a collaborative environment. So, in my everyday, I really try to utilize that collaborative essence when it comes to specifically communicating with this individual so that I don't continue to stress or so that the conflict doesn't continue to arise and put me in a position where I was before, where I'm lashing out or kitchen sinking all this information, either on a one on one with him or in a group setting. And one of the key aspects in order to mitigate that in terms of the communication is what I had done differently was just simply how I communicated that information to him. And more importantly, that it was in an open setting. One of the key factors I use is my cell phone. I haven't opened it, but one of the key things that I use is an application on here specific for my work. And this allows me to communicate with not only the rest of my team members, but to communicate with him directly. This application also allows me to do video calls or voice recordings, very similar to iMessage. And that ties into the skills I've learned with active listening. So, just to give you a little bit of background, our textbook defines that under listening as a general topic, it involves six different steps: receiving, understanding, interpreting, evaluating, remembering, and responding to others in communication. And so, another story that I have is about work. And I was told that my behavior in a meeting was too overtly attentive, meaning anytime that we would have a meeting with a seller, I was overly communicating, whether that was continuous eye nods, saying yes or okay, essentially really utilizing nonverbal cues such as eye contact and facial expressions, kind of similarly to how I'm doing it now. I talk a lot with my hands. And in the moment, the feedback that I had gotten from my leadership was, hey, sometimes you don't need to be overly attentive or showing that you are attentive. And instead, you could simply wait until that person stops talking and then you can then respond. That really ensures that you're actively listening to what that other person is saying versus using these nonverbal cues to interrupt. And so one of the learnings that I had found from an article that I used as a source was all these various tips for how to apply these different active listening skills, especially during work meetings. So, one of the biggest key takeaways that I had learned from this source, as well as the textbook, was um, offering minimal verbal cues while I'm listening, where I'm reducing the amount of times I vocalize either a yes or no, or I am, keeping my face in a very neutral tone, and I'm preventing myself from nodding very similarly to how I'm doing now as I'm being very mindful of it. And because of that, that has allowed me to not focus so much on what I'm doing during these meetings and how I'm coming off to others non-verbally, but allows me to really sit with the communication that's coming out of that person, meaning I'm able to sit there effectively, interpret the information that I'm received. I can ask follow-up questions if I don't understand, but essentially just really toning down the nonverbal cues as I was really over the top with that. And maybe that comes with the concept of, minimizing distractions and really kind of honing in on ensuring that my skill sets for listening come off appropriately. And with some of the other tools that I've learned in this chapter, that's how I apply specifically active listening to just my everyday life, whether that be if I'm in a meeting with a particular client, whether I am having a conversation with a team manager, or if I'm just talking to a friend and catching up. And that concludes the communications that I have in my everyday life. We've covered conflict management and the learnings and experiences that I had with that, along with the experience and the tools that I've learned with active listening. And these learnings not only have helped me make an impactful impression, but have also harnered or uh, have really held on to the relationships that I have built. And they've actually strengthened my working relationships specifically because I do feel like a lot of these elements and concepts really tie into your professionalism. So I thank you so much for listening, and I hope you guys have a great day. Thanks. Bye.